Awesome. So let's get started. So, hey everyone, welcome to the first of, we're going to have probably 4 or 5 sessions on what we call the Wezesha corporate versus self-employed series. So most of you know me, but those of you who don't, my name is Dr. Kamono Ishada, although everyone calls me Ichi. I do have a Gava name, Stephen, but not anyone knows it. Not many people know that. But I'm really truly excited to kick off this highly relevant and contemporary topic. Leah and I have been talking about this thing for a really long time. We've talked about, corporate versus self-employment. I'm corporate employed, Leah is self-employed, so I thought let's start having this discussion with others who have asked me the same exact question. And so the goal of this call is just to talk through how does one pivot, what's the good time to pivot, what are some of the suggestions you give? And the hope is sincerely for all of you as you kick off 2024, if you're aspiring to either say to be corporate employed or thinking about self-employment, at least you can come to this space and get some resources, some information, and just learn about what it takes to be self-employed. So this particular series is sponsored by BBI Design Solutions. So BBI Design Solutions is a full-service interior design firm that does everything from interior design for builders, homeowners, and trade partners. So if you're in the market for remodeling, renovation, any sort of like design type work that you need done, especially in 2024 as you think about your resolutions, please consider using BBI Design Solutions. So now that we have that out of the way, let's get to work. So Leo, I've known Leo a really, really, really long time. I think we're talking with Senga about how long we've been in the US, and Leo, I think I've known you probably like 25 years, so a really long time. And throughout those 25 years, I would say you and I have had this discussion about corporate versus self-employment literally ever since we started, we started talking together. I consider Leo not just my friend, he doesn't know this, but I do consider him my mentor. So Leo, big ups to you for always being the person I confide in. But more than that, I thought as we start this series, there is no one who I think can really help kick this off better than Leo, because he will tell us the truth about what self-employment is all about. So having said that, Leo, welcome.
Asante, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to do something that we hadn't scripted, but I think you'll be okay with this. So I have it written down over here so I don't forget. So before we get started, I want to do a little icebreaker. Okay, the rules are simple. Leo, do not complicate this. I'm going to give you 2 words. I want you to say the first one that comes to mind of those 2. Okay. I don't want you to think about it. I don't want you to contextualize it. I don't want if this, then that. I just want you to say, if I say word 1 and 2, you tell me which one comes top of mind for you, okay?
Okay.
Okay, you ready?
Sure.
Drake or Lil Baby?
Drake.
Okay. Whitney Houston or Mariah Carey?
Mariah Carey.
Davido or Burna Boy?
Burna Boy for sure.
They don't seem kind of easy. Boys to Men or Jodeci?
Jodeci.
Lost Boys or Naughty by Nature?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I'd have to go with Lost Boys.
Lost Boys, okay. And then this one, you might break some hearts here, depending on how you answer this question. Southern Cali or Bay Area?
At the Bay, for the old Bay, not the new Bay. The old Bay Area for sure.
Bay Area.
The Bay Area for sure.
Okay, fantastic. Cool, man. So that wasn't too difficult, was it?
That's cool.
All right, so let's get started. So, tell us a little bit about yourself and give us a little bit about like your personal journey to where you are now.
So I mean, again, Leo Fire, Tanzanian by virtue of parents, but Kenyan by virtue of where I was brought up. So probably connect more with my Kenyan roots than my Tanzanian roots, but I'm very much aligned with both worlds, right? Live in Atlanta. I worked in the digital space for probably 25, 30 years, right? Worked in SoCal, moved from SoCal to the Bay, which is where sort of my career picked up, right? Because there was more opportunity in the Bay. And pretty much that's sort of my career journey started that way, right? I started off as a web analytics guy, sort of data science, web analytics. Tried programming, wasn't really good at it, not good at math. I think if you're going to do programming, you have to be natively good at doing math. What I usually feel is it's a gift, right? The people who are just gifted at understanding math, they tend to be better in programming. I wasn't one of those guys, right? So I ended up finding something that I'm good at, which was really doing a cross-section of marketing vis-a-vis analytics and data. And I flourished in that, right? So I just did that for a couple of years for a big bunch of agencies. Anybody who's familiar with marketing agencies, there's Omnicom, there's WPP. I've worked for both. So I've worked for digital agencies within these two big marketing conglomerate companies in San Francisco over the last 20 years or so. So that's pretty much it before I kind of branched off to do my own thing.
Okay. So let's talk about you doing your own thing. I mean, thinking about what you've said in your corporate trajectory, feels like you are in like the top 2 agencies. So literally what you've done throughout your life has built you to be in the corporate world, and you were in the corporate world. And somewhere you pivoted. And let me tell you a little bit about, your business as I see it. You're in a very unique position. A lot of the people who talk about entrepreneurship and self-employment are probably, or arguably, sole proprietors. They have, a group of people that they sell a service to, but you sell your services to other businesses.
Yeah.
Not to take away from the fact that you've helped a lot of Kenyans, a lot of Africans, a lot of, small business people in America, but your core business involves you conducting business with other companies.
Yep.
That means you have to have like HR, you have payroll, like all those things that are true business. So tell us a little bit about your core business and what do you sell to the customers and what outcomes do they get from you?
Yeah, so I'm in the digital media operations business, right? Which is really weird whenever I tell people what I do. Probably very few people here will know what I do, right? But my background is in working in these agencies as a person who operationalizes their digital advertising, right? So the guy who makes sure ads run, the guy who makes sure ads can be measured, the guy who makes sure ads don't necessarily fail out in the wild, right? And I do that at scale. So what I've flourished is in finding a sort of a niche or path around working with brands or agencies that need the capacity to scale their advertising. So my largest account is Uber. So if you've stumbled on an Uber ad somewhere on the internet, it's more than likely it's been trafficked, or if it's been put where it is by somebody on my team, right? So I don't do the strategy, but I ensure that what you see ends up in the right environment. I ensure that it has the necessary ingredients for you to be able to track it, to measure it, and I ensure that somebody at Uber can report on it, right? So Uber is one of my clients. Work with other interesting clients that you guys may or may not be familiar with, like Sherwin-Williams, Les Mills, obviously like you guys at BBI. So I think, some brands I work with, I can't really talk about them because agencies come to me to operationalize their businesses. So yeah, I may be working on Slack and you guys may never know because agencies don't want to talk about who's actually doing the work behind the scenes. But the reality is that's kind of my secret sauce, right? I'm able to do market operations at scale, and I've been able to do it well over a long time period. That it's just something I decided to do on the side, ended up becoming a thing that created this business for me.
Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about doing it on the side and then it becomes a business for you. But I think what I'm hearing you say is that being self-employed is not just about you, it's about scaling a business for your customers as well.
100%. 100%. So like my story is interesting in that if you have time, when we do, I was working at a company and I started consulting on the side for a brand, right? But I misunderstood what the non-compete means in my contract, right? Because I worked for a company where I thought, creative people tend to create, real honesty is, people who are creatives, they tend to create things, they create websites for clients on the side, yet still work for the agencies. So I thought I could do the same thing, but I was pretty senior in my organization, right? So I was consulting. And then someone in that big organization realized, hey, somebody's actually doing the work here, right? It's a classic case of the Chinese guy who's coding for the Google employee, right? So I got called in. The guy said, "Hey, looks like you've been doing this work. Why don't you just help us traffic and do these things that we need to get done by Friday?" And I did it, and I got paid for it, right? Next 2 weeks, they called me back, said, "Hey, boss, we need X, Y, and Z. Why don't you come and help us do this stuff on social media? That's, we need them done by Friday." So I consulted for quite a bit of time until my company started pitching for that brand. And that became an issue, right? Because I was senior and I was supposed to go for the pitch. So there was a whole bunch of issues. And that was the moment where I had to kind of make some decisions, right? Because I was given, legally, I was told, "Hey, look, we're going to fire you, or you either leave or you stop doing this thing you're doing on the side," right? And I think it was a moment for me. We always talk about what is the turning point for me. It wasn't a moment where I woke up and said, "Let me go and create a business." The opportunity presented itself. And then I kind of thought about whether I should actually go solo or should I stay where I was, right? Because I was pretty happy where I was. But I was being pushed out because I started something that wasn't theoretically allowed in my contract.
I'm glad you weren't sued or reported back to.
Almost was, but yeah, tough times.
It's interesting what you said. There's a lot of research out there that tries to explore how people, or what is it that motivates people to start businesses. And typically the 4 reasons that they do is an opportunity arises, which is something that you stated, right?
Yep.
Sometimes they have resources and they're just looking for business, right? I have tools, because of that, I have a desire to begin a business. There's a passion project, right? Mm-hmm. Something that you're passionate about. For even some, it's an event that happens, right?
Yep.
Tragic, or maybe even something that's non-tragic that drives them to start a business. There's also this argument that some people pose that it's sort of like anthropological. Basically, it's in the genes. It's a DNA. You always say in Kenya, chicks are business people.
Yeah.
I think partially it's true that some people are genetically inclined to be business owners versus corporate employed. So what I'm hearing from you is a couple of things. One, opportunity arose, and then an event happened that then triggered you to say, "You know what, side hustle, not more. Let me make it a full-time job." So tell me about that. Like, a lot of people here are probably self-employed as a side hustle.
Yep.
Is there a benefit to having a side hustle and staying corporate employed, or should you just go full throttle and be self-employed?
But to me today, I'd say always plan it out, right? In hindsight, I should have planned it out, right? I should have planned it better because it was a really stressful time in my life. And I'll give you a few secrets as to why mine worked out versus if somebody else did it my way, maybe wouldn't. But let's back on a little bit. I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit, right? So I'm the guy who started Levy, right? I'm the guy who realized social media for niche, demos will work out, right? But I never had everything. I was not blessed to go to Stanford, and I was not blessed to go to some Ivy League school that allowed me to have a network of people that could help me catapult my businesses, right? So I had ideas. I've always had ideas ever since I was young, right? But I think there was always something that's stopping me from going to the next level with my ideas, right? I mean, you know that. We've been in lots of conversations. I was doing parties in LA, right? I mean, we were one of the few guys who were doing, parties at Letasca, right? And parties with Steve-O. So I think for me, that's still part of entrepreneurship, right? In terms of trying to figure out what this thing is. But there's a key difference between, to me today, the difference in a small business and a startup, right? Those are 2 very distinctive paths that one can take. I think for me at the time, we were trying to build small businesses, right? There were small side hustles per se. Whereas there's a startup, which is actually curating something from ground up, having an idea, building a business plan, finding ways to get it funded, and then sort of going to get investors to help you start this thing. So I think for me, my position today is really born from the fact that I already had a spirit of innovation. I had a spirit of creation. I had a spirit of starting something. I just didn't have the tools. I didn't have the network. I didn't have the things that I needed to start a business at the age that I was in when I was creating all these ideas, right? What happened now was that I got home, I was groomed by an organization, right? A corporate organization groomed me and gave me the tools, sort of led me to understand how to run things, right? Not necessarily how to start a business, but how to run my job or how to run my career at the time. And then when the opportunity came up, I felt more confident to start. Whereas before, I didn't feel confident enough to leave my job and go start this levy thing that I was trying to do at the time, or leave my job and go start Live.OC or go start a forum at the time, right? I just didn't feel I had enough of what I needed at the time. You could even funding, right? Because when I left my job, I had some type of resource to support me and my family for 3 months, for 5 months, right? So one of the conversations I had with myself is like, how much runway do I need, right? And I feel that, I have these conversations with my friends. Often I say, I wouldn't be able to do what I do if I didn't have the support system that I have at home, right? So I have a wife who was able to support the family while I hedged and while when I pivoted, right? So I wasn't worried about mortgage. I wasn't worried about rent being paid. I wasn't even worried about my health insurance, which was one of my biggest concerns before I started my business, right? I was like, damn, I have amazing health insurance. If I start this business, I have no health insurance, right? Off the jump. I have to go figure out what Obamacare is all about, right? So that was a fear. Like, that was a genuine fear for me in terms of how do I start this, yet I don't have insurance. And I've enjoyed insurance for the last 15, 20 years. I've never had to think about going to a doctor because it was just there, right? So yeah, I mean, I think the personality was there. Me as a person who's interested in doing something has always been there. I just don't think the opportunity was always available for me. And it's not that I was scared. It's just that I didn't think I had the right pieces around me up until the point I started this current business that I have, which gave me a lot more confidence. The environment was better. I moved to Atlanta. I feel like being in this environment allowed me so many different things because, I'm not out in the streets every day. I'm home. So this city is different. I mean, a lot of people have different experiences about Atlanta, but I lived in the Bay where most people would argue you have more, your proximity to people who can help you is much more intricate. Whereas I think that's not the case, right? There are very few Kenyans or very few people you can relate to. The very few people of color who you can relate to in that market compared to Atlanta. So there are things that had to be in place for me to actually get the courage to do it. And I think this city gave me that. So this is one of the reasons why I was able to start my business. Being in a city where I could see people like me doing businesses gave me the courage to say, okay, cool, let me start consulting, right? And let me do it full throttle, like that kind of thing. So
you've dropped a ton of gems here. Like,
it's a lot to unpack.
I'm going to have to listen to this recording to review them. But some of what I heard you say was, okay, naturally you had an entrepreneurial spirit, and I've known that from the day I met you. Right? But then it almost had to mature. It had to mature, and it matured through actually being corporate employed. Like that gave you a certain sense of maturity. You were groomed by your organization. You learned how to run an organization. But even as you're making the pivot, you had to think ahead of how much runway do I have. And what's interesting that I hadn't thought about before, and I'd really like to research this, is the environment around you. Arguably, the Bay Area, because I've been there. That's where my home company is where you'd expect innovation to happen. That's where all the ideas come from. Right?
Yep.
Then you're saying being in Atlanta and seeing people like you, seeing the streets like you, that actually gave you more confidence than, let's say, where you were in the Bay Area.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, Atlanta is different. I mean, like, you have to be here to see it, but it's different when you go for a tech meetup here, right? You'll see more Black folk and more people like you trying to do things versus if I go for a meetup in San Francisco, right? And even then, you get intimidated, right? I'm hanging out with folks who are from Stanford, from Cal, right? Who are, doing stuff that's out of this world. And you trying to build, I'm trying to build a portal for Kenyans to come and connect, right? Like, who are you, right? So being here allowed me to kind of see things differently. And again, I got the courage to pursue that. I should also caveat that, again, I built a business off something that I already knew, right? So I didn't pivot on a new idea. I didn't start farming, right? I was already doing this thing at my job. I started consulting in it, and then I just figured out how to scale it, That's the key difference. So the fear was not necessarily in doing something new. The fear was in how can I actually scale this thing that I've been doing at my job. And fun fact for me actually is when I saw a scope, right? So one of the few things is I actually started doing scoping, and I looked at the SOW and I'm like, damn, these guys are collecting $325 an hour for my time. Like WTF, right? So, why is it that they're able to collect $325 an hour, yet that's not necessarily what I'm making? And I think that was the thing that kind of pissed me off. And the more I kind of, understood that at director level, that's the rate that I can get in the market. I mean, it doesn't translate that way, obviously, once you start working.
Yeah.
But that really pissed me off, and it still pisses me off. I still have a scope somewhere and a rate card for the agency that I pin somewhere on my wall and say, okay, cool, that's the goal. We have to get to $325 an hour.
You know what's interesting about that story? I think a couple of people who I've spoken to in this forum may know this, but if you get a chance, watch this thing on Netflix on Beckham, right? So yeah, I know you soccer sometimes. Yeah, you're from TZ, so Futa is not in your DNA. But you watch this thing about Beckham and how he went through the ranks. He used to play for Manchester United. Sort of that was the home team based on like his dad and all that, right? And he went to the highest level of football to join the best team, arguably the best team that everyone aspires to join, Real Madrid. So think about corporate ladder, you've climbed to the best job ever, right? The best place ever. But even once he was there, he wasn't satisfied. Right? Mm-hmm. When LA Galaxy called him, he moved to MLS, to the league here, and they couldn't afford him. The amount of change he was making in Real Madrid were 10 times more than what he was going to make in MLS. And so what they did for him is they created a new law for him, right? It's called the Beckham wage. They basically lifted everyone's wage for that. But where this story, I think, intersects with yours is he decided to put in his contract a clause that said when he's ready to buy an MLS team, mm-hmm. he's going to buy it for 25 million. Yep. So when he eventually made the move to buy Inter Miami for 25 million, an MLS team is going for 500 million. Right? Yep. So when I think about your story, it's very similar to this. You will be capped by what you think you can make in the best company that you've worked hard to get.
100%.
If you sort of take that skill set and decide to employ it outside on your own, the earning potential is that much more. So as I hear your story, I'm like, wow, perhaps that's the pivot, is to say, I have acquired all the skill set that I have in corporate. I can choose to stay here and make minimal margins, or I can take all that, own it, go out and create something for myself and get that backup money, right? Is that something you think?
It is. I mean, it's a motivating factor, right? So, I think for me, the thing is, I don't know how many people quantify what they're worth hourly, right? So for instance, I'll tell you this off the bat. Ever since I started working for myself, one of the few things I'm very conscious about is the value of my time in terms of how I spend, right? Time with other people, right? And even time with myself, time with my family and so forth, right? I remember somebody asked, in fact, you asked me a couple of years ago, you were like, hey, what's the one thing you would say is not necessarily the reward, but what's the thing, right? And the thing for me is time, right? And I quantify my time. So I tend not to spend time, and people, a lot of people feel like I'm a snob because I don't go to the events and I don't do a lot of stuff, but my time is valuable. So I value my time, right? But what sucks is I've actually done an exercise to figure out if I'm not home doing the things that can connect me with money or connect me with my income or connect me with revenue, then I'm wasting money and I'm spending time and I'm spending money, right? So it's an interesting exercise if you can do it one day and figure out, okay, cool, I'm worth X. So if I'm not behind my computer creating things that can give me X, right, then I'm basically losing X, right? In essence, to me, right? If you're employed, it's different, right? Your time is relative, right? You get paid, 40 hours a week regardless, unless you're in a position where you can make overtime. But you put in your 40, you're done, right? So it's a very different juxtaposition. This is stuff I keep telling you every day. It's like, again, my time is money. And it really, I mean it emphatically. So I plan everything based on, am I going to lose or am I going to make money if I take that particular trip, if I take that call, or if I go towards this particular journey, period.
So this is where I always come in and say, and this is for, the rest of the folks. Remember, this whole series is about, it's not about the value of self-employment, but it's the comparison of self-employment versus corporate. So I'll give you a couple of stories, then I'll nail you, because me, I'm a corporate guy. I've been 25, 30, 40 years, whatever it takes, I'll be corporate, right? But I shared this with, Victor, who was the VC of Strat, and I said, I remember, like, right after I finished high school, I just wanted a job, like a corporate job. I wanted to wear a suit and a tie. That was the decision maker for me to start working. And as I think about it, if I do calculations, it's doing like 2024, so that's like maybe minus 6 years of campo before the lecturers went to strike. I've literally been working for over 31 years, like having someone pay my paycheck over 31 years, right?
Sure.
And then today we're riding in the Moti with Chelsea and my mother-in-law. And Chelsea, she's smart and she gets this, achievement award and she's sharing it with us. Then her social tells her, yeah, continue, stay in school, because if you get grades like that, then you go to Harvard and then you get a very good job. So the mentality that I had 30 years ago is still here with a lot of, if you look at the cast here, a lot of Kenyans where there's a path that leads you to corporate. No one, when Chelsea said, well, I think I want to be an influencer, everyone in the car was like, what do you mean? What is, like, we discourage people to think creatively outside of corporate, right? So let me put that aside. I want you to comment on that. But let me continue down my path, and I'll share this picture just, I think it makes a good, let's go here. You and I, let's see if I can it. You and I have a lot in common, right? We like the same things. We travel to the same places, whether it's us by ourselves, from Colombia, Punta Cana, whatever, or with our families. We share a lot in common. And every time we come back from a trip, this never ceases to happen. I come back, I look at the calendar to see when my paycheck is coming, because it's very predictable. Yep. I take 2 days PTO so I can rest from the high knees, right, and just relax. But you are always turning around to go somewhere else to do your business. Yep. So I want you to think about all those three things that I've said. One is the way we were raised to work through school, get a job, and get handcuffed and get, the golden watch and all the money that comes with it. Two was sort of the culture that even our parents had, which tells us we need to work for someone. And then three, the fact that I have predictability every 2 weeks. I get raises regardless. I get bonuses all the time. And frankly, I've worked hard, right? So I'm in one of the best companies in the world and I want to retire here. Why should I give all that up for a chance that maybe I'll be okay with this self-employment? And I bet 100 people here asking themselves, go.
So let's start with the first one. You, first of all, are old, number one. Two, you're old. Okay. But two, and I don't mean to offend anybody here, right? But I say most of us who grew up in Africa are struggling through what I call post-colonial stress disorder, right? There are a lot of things that are reeled into us that we think are normal. We were talking about this whole boarding school conversation. I don't want to bring that up, but bottom line is this. Even when I grew up, I remember a song. So many vijana, mje kupata degree, mwisho wa masomo, mtakuja kupata kazi nzuri sana. So this is deeply ingrained in you. There's nothing you can do about it, right? Again, your demo, right? I'm raising a 21-year-old who's growing up in a community, in a society, in a culture, and in a generation where the job doesn't define her, right? And I have had to adapt to understand what she means. And for her, it's not even money, right? I mean, you know that we have these conversations all the time. Like, well, my daughter is not motivated by money. Whereas for me and you, we panic when we feel like we don't have money, right? So our generations are completely different. However, I kind of want to give you this thing that I don't think it should change. It will change how you think about the workforce, right? But I'm traveling next week to Tanzania, right? I'll come back. I'll travel to Colombia. I'll come back. I'll travel to Argentina, right? And none of those things impact how somebody will tell me I'm spending my time, right? I've never had issues with my kids. In fact, forget about the work trips. Today, my son was sick. My wife was at work. She works at Grady. She couldn't get off. I left what I was doing, told my clients, pause. I was on a call. I said, hey, pause. My son's vomiting. I'll be back. I'll call you back. The luxury of entrepreneurship, or the luxury that I have, you don't have, no matter what. Right? I'm sorry to say it. It's just that how it is, right? From a time perspective, it's not even about money. I think most people who work today have good corporate jobs probably make more money than me, but I have amazing time, right? And I can create time, and I can modify and change and manipulate time how I want to fit my schedule, right? And that's, I think, is the beauty about sort of being self-employed for me. And I think, you know, the ability to create time is such an amazing benefit, and I can't overstate how crazy and how amazing time can change your life. Whereas if I compare myself with you, there are things you just can't do, right? There are trips we try to coordinate with you, right? We were trying to coordinate trips with Peggy. Remember, when Peggy was working, she couldn't take trips when we were taking trips because her situation was different. Her boss wouldn't let her leave and all types of stuff that I don't have those problems, right? For me, I create my schedule. I can move with my job, right? Like, you know, real talk, like, you know, I can work from Zanzibar, right? And I think that's priceless to me, right? No amount of money can buy you that thing. And it's a lesson that I've learned. And I've said, even if I'm making 40K a year, as long as I have my time, for me, I'm good, right? Because that time has allowed me to build better relationships at home, better relationships with my friends, with you guys, better relationships with my kids, right? I picked up my kid up today. He's been home the whole day. My wife doesn't even know how the kid got home, whether he was sick. You know what I mean? Like, she found out when she got home. So can't buy that.
Okay, so I'll accept that. Yeah. I think, and we've talked about this, we had a Reimagine Wealth discussion a few weeks ago, and perhaps somewhere in there's, when you have not too much to lose, then maybe that's a motivation to move on. But if you have a lot to lose, it becomes even that much more difficult. I think in session 5, we'll talk about, you know, healthcare and all that, but there are some benefits of being corporate employed, especially if you're with a good employer. Right?
Sure.
There's a lot you could lose in terms of time, in terms of benefits, in terms of care that you cannot get that level of care unless you spend a lot of money being self-employed, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
But it's the leverage, right? I think, sorry, and especially, let's use you as an example. You work for an organization that dangles the carrot to make sure that you commit your time to them as opposed to you, right? So your organization will give you
it's a very good carrot, by the way.
Right. They give you a gym, they give you food, right? So
Yeah.
and all those things are methodical to make sure that you spend more time with them versus with yourself.
Yeah.
Are we being fair? So to me, besides, if you take away the benefits, and I think, yes, I'm struggling trying to figure out, as an entrepreneur, or let's say as a business owner, one of the biggest challenges for me today is to figure out how my 401k has been structured. I've had to jump into Vanguard for the first time last 5 years to figure out, okay, cool, what was this thing? What was my old company contributing? Yeah, there are benefits to how your particular retirement plan has been structured compared to mine.
Yeah.
But I've learned about stocks, right? Like, I've learned about how I can manage my own money. And those are things that I think companies make you a bit obsolete. And, you know, Mongo, if she's on the call, she'd be super happy about this, right? Corporate companies make you kind of dumb around how to manage your own money, right? So somebody else is managing your money. You know, a lot of people, I mean, I bet you 90% of people don't know what an ETF is, right? But your money's stored somewhere in an ETF and you have no clue whether it's higher, 90%, 20%. So I feel like my corporate gig made me stupid about my own money, right? I think my corporate gig made me dumb about healthcare. I never saw a doctor. I'm gonna be honest with you. I've had health insurance for the last 15, 20 years. I never really used it. I've had dental, never really used it. And also because I don't know, can't explain to why. But the minute I went solo, I was like, damn, I gotta use these things, right? Because I understand the value of them now, right? I know how much it is to actually have, vision, right? Because I look at those things intricately now. I know the difference between what a copay is, right? Like I pay more attention to those types of things now. I pay more attention to money and situations that actually require me to understand where, you know what I mean? Where am I investing? Where am I not investing in? Whereas when I was corporate, again, I'm not saying there was anything wrong with that, but I had a whole department to figure out where to put my money. Immediately when you're hired, they give you a packet, right? And that packet tells you how they're going to do this thing. And you walk away. Very few of us, especially middles, we don't have that, right? Like we don't necessarily have that brain of, let me go in and start trying to figure out how my particular retirement plan or my benefits are structured. So to that in mind, I'm basically saying is this: if you go solo and sort of learn to adapt to how to manage yourself, you actually have potential to make more money and make your savings work better than actually where you are, right? Like, because right now, I can guarantee you have a financial manager who's hired by Google to help you figure out how to, again, hopefully not, but right? Like my wife works at Grady. The financial manager is provided by Grady to help doctors figure out how to manage their money. So whose best interest does he have?
So I think you bring a good point, and I'll take us home with this because I have a few questions that I think speak to, I like what you said, corporate dumbed you, right? Like made you dumb to the realities of life. So let's now switch focus now away from you and talk about running the business, right? What surprised you when you started the business? Good or bad?
A lot. I didn't know what I don't know, right? I made a lot of mistakes on the onset. One of the biggest mistakes or things that I've had to learn is taxes, right? I made a lot of tax mistakes, right? I also happen to have a business that has an offshore onshore team. So I own offices outside the US, and I spent 2 years trying to figure out how to own those businesses and still make money from those businesses, right? I ended up selling those businesses because it was such a big tax burden for me. So the American tax code is like, it's like pata potera. You really need an expert who understands the tax code. So first things first is you have to understand the tax code, period. And I made a lot of mistakes. I used to be a guy of H&R Block. I mean, obviously I've grown over that now, but taxes, it's a big problem for anyone who's trying to start a business, right? And their business at scale. So that was one lesson, a very important lesson that I had to learn. And then I also didn't know what I don't know, right? At my job before, I had a team of about 5 people, and I thought I was leading, right? When I started my company, we had 15. Right now, I have 65 employees, right? It's different to lead a company of 65 compared to lead a team of 5, right? Like 5 people who are under already an organizational structure. There's already templates. There's L1, L2. Like when you walk into Facebook today, there's already a structure in place in terms of how you can do reviews and log into Radiant 6 and do this, and this, and you know what I mean? But I've had to learn those things and had to figure out what's the right cadence. How do I do reviews, right? Right now, I'm in the process of doing some performance reviews for my employees, right? And trying to figure out who should I give a raise and what's the allowable raise? What is the actual, that's been tough. And I think those are things that I don't know. Like I've always been telling myself, is there a class you take to learn those things? No, right? So what I maintain is a series of mentors, right? Or I maintain a group of people that I call my honorary board, a trust board of sorts, right? People that I confide in. Maybe I'll go to Mwai or Nick and talk to Nick about certain things that he knows. I'll come to you, talk to you about some things that you know, and other people that I confide in. And then I take all that information and I try to decipher it to make some logical decisions around it. And then I do also connect with CEOs, right, and people that own businesses and run bigger companies to try and figure out, how they make decisions. But tax messed me up. I think the biggest lesson for me is I had to learn to delegate, right? So really trusting yourself and trusting your teams and trusting that, especially for me, where most of the people that I hire are not in the US, right? I have a guy in Kenya, I have a guy in Bogota, I have a guy in Buenos Aires, I have a guy in El Salvador. Having to trust them, knowing that you don't see them, you don't meet them every day, right? There's no office where you can do knowledge transfer, but trust that they'll do their jobs, right? So there's been a level of learning to understand how to sort of relinquish and say, okay, cool, I'm all right. And if things go bad, great, we'll try to fix them, but let those guys handle it because I hired them based on their merits and based on the things that they've done and the experiences and so forth. So there's a lot to learn, but if you're to ask me one thing that I think I didn't do well, and I'm still trying to figure it out till today, is taxes, man. Like taxes will screw you up as a business. If you go solo, be ready to figure it out,
And you have a lot of people here who probably don't have as global a business of yours, but they straddle US and Kenya, right?
Yeah.
And so even, when we talk with Mukami next week, I think she had gone home because she was trying to sort out this thing in Kenya. I think I heard Jean talk about the same. I'm curious what Monga says about it. It's being able to understand that you cannot get away from these administrative things, right? Which now leads me to probably one of the biggest things that I found with people like you, with Wawa, with Wai, is you probably intended on fulfilling your purpose in your self-employment, the things you love to do, right? Like you would love to commit 100%. For Wawa, she wants to design house 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Then you end up finding out that will only be 10 or 20% because you have all this administrative stuff that you need to work on. Talked about performance, taxes, creating a vision, business plan, checking your P&L, like doing all that. So how do you balance the motivation of staying true to your passion and your purpose and all this other stuff that needs to be done in order to run a business?
I treat all those other things like the job, right? So for me, I treat all those other things like things that need to happen. One of the few things I've always been trying to balance is this, I call it the triangle of life, doing the things that I love to do, getting paid to do the things that I love to do, and actually being good at doing the things that I do, right? I happen to have sort of two. I don't have the complete triangle sorted out, right? Like I'm really good at what I do, so I get paid for it, right? And then, again, do I love it? To me, it's debatable, right? Because if you ask me, maybe I want to do music, right? And I'm dabbling my feet in music and maybe dabbling my feet in other things. So I happen to have a company that does things that is paying me really well, but I don't necessarily love it. I think that's really important. A different distinction between me and maybe somebody like Peggy who's doing something that she loves, right? And she's trying to figure it out. So admin for me is a function of necessity. Right? It's like tying your shoelaces, otherwise you'll fall down, right? So you make time to do it. It's the job. The admin part for me is the job. But delegation allows you to create time to do admin, right? And sort of hiring smart people and hiring the right people. That's been a lesson also for me. One of the few things that I'd say is a priceless lesson, right? Is I spent a lot of time with the wrong people, had to wake up one day and realize that's not the right person I'm supposed to be with, right? One of my favorite books, Good to Great, Jim Collins, taught me everything that I need to know. It's first the who, then the what. Get the right people in the bus, and then you'll determine what the destination is. And that's kind of where my company is now, where I'm really focused on the right people. Whereas before, I just had people, right? So it wasn't necessarily, and it took me a long time to figure out if they were the right people, right? And through that process, you spend money and time and all types of things. I say a lot to say that, I have HR, right? So like I have human resource persons. I don't really worry about talent. Right? I really don't spend enough time trying to think through who we've hired, why we've hired them. I will review them at some point, but for something that I would spend maybe 6 hours in the past without her or without that department, without that role, I just don't do it anymore, right? I trust that they'll hire the right people. I'll interview them when I need to and so forth, but I have to trust my team to do the right thing, right? And again, at 65, it's impossible for you to interview everybody, right? Like you kind of have to let go and trust the process itself.
You know, what you said is pretty interesting about delegation. I don't think, uh, what's my friend's name? Sue is here, but she talks about these 4 stages. She talks about, like, it's almost like Maslow's hierarchy, but it's more about like creation of wealth. And she says the bottom stage is implementation, which a lot of people are. That's when you're just doing you're just doing over and over again, right? Tasks, repetitive tasks. Then the next one is unification. When you have a really good skill set, you're getting paid well. You know, you're utilizing your skill to bring people together and meet an objective. And then the higher one, and with those two, with implementation and execution and unification, you're sort of capped, because that's what we call quote unquote corporate, right?
Yep.
You have good skill sets, so you're doing well. You know, you go from director, VP, senior VP, etc. And then she talks about the higher two, which are communication, where you're selling. You're communicating what you're selling.
Yep.
And then the last one is sort of like imagination, where you have the luxury of being innovative, because that's where the money comes in, right? You create this product or service that, if you grow it at scale, brings you money. So I think what I'm hearing from you is spend enough time doing this administrative stuff, enough time to kind of know about it, know what it is,
Yep.
now push it off to someone else, right?
100%.
Delegate it, so now you can go to the higher levels and really get to the point that you're looking for.
100%.
All right?
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
100%. And like, I have an accountant, right? So I'll give you a good example. I used to have one accountant, right? And I thought that was enough. And then I realized she's a bookkeeper, right? Accountant, a bookkeeper, and a CFO, right? Whereas I need all 3, right? So one person will give me, can do scoping, can do projections, whereas one person's job is really to balance the books.
Yeah.
She goes into QuickBooks, she does her thing, she gets out. Right? The other person tells me, hey, you know what? Maybe next year you can't do this, right? Maybe this year you should do this. Maybe you should consider cutting down here. Now, again, some CEOs have the, you know, I don't consider myself a CEO, I consider myself a founder, not at that level yet, but some CEOs are blessed enough. So if you happen to come from a finance background, again, you can actually do all these things by yourself. Folks like me need to be able to consult with people who can actually advise you, and then you make the ultimate decision. But that's part of delegation. So again, 6 hours of me being in QuickBooks and doing all these things, I don't have it, right?
Yeah.
And that's the luxury of being in a position where I'm in. Again, I'm blessed enough to be able to say I can pay somebody to do that. So it gives me time to think about the bigger picture stuff, right? Like I spend more time doing sales, I spend more time doing pitches, I spend more time going out to meet my clients versus, you know, the admin stuff. I really don't do admin stuff as much as you would expect me to.
Okay. So you still have like additional, I know we're slated to end at 10, but I imagine some people have questions, so I really want to open this up to folks who have questions. But then I'll ask you this question, because this is like particularly for me. As I said, corporate all the way. So what do you miss about being corporate employed?
I mean, I miss a lot. If I'm being honest, I miss a lot of things. One of the main things I miss is I used to work in an environment where I could look beside me and get some really concrete feedback about stuff, right? I don't have any peers that I can look up to ask questions, to learn from, you know, because I worked in tech, so I worked in an environment where people are always constantly doing stuff, right? Like right now, I'm trying to learn AI, but I have to teach myself, right? So there's no subject expert in my thing, right? Unless I hire them and so forth. So there's something that's to be said around working in an environment where you can just sort of tap people who are, you know, experts in their fields, and you can go to them, ask questions, and learn from them. Yeah, obviously I miss the perks, right? Like you don't, you know, I don't know if I'll make my quota next week, right? So I don't know, right? Like right now I'm trying to collect 300 grand from a client who was going through COVID issues, and it's the reality of it, right? It's going to cost me more to sue them and go after them to collect that money. That's a risk. But it's a function of doing business, right? It's a function, every business goes through that. So I can't sit there and feel my shame on me because, you know, I have this situation. But yeah, some days I do wake up and say, man, it was so nice. I just, like you, it's just every 2 weeks that check hits the accounts and I'm sour, right?
Yeah.
there's a novelty to that, but there's a, right, for me, I've set up my organization in a way that I can do what I call owner's equity. So yeah, if I decide to take a loan from the business that's worth $50,000, I can do that, whereas I couldn't do that before, right? So I've been able to make some really hefty investments using the business because I can, right? Whereas I don't think I would have been able to do that if I was set up any other different way. I should also preface the fact that I have 3 businesses. That's another thing where I having one business that's successful has allowed me to be able to reinvest and try to do other things, right? Whereas I think if I had a job, it would be difficult for me to pivot on 3 other things that I'm not really, I'm not really an expert in, right? So doing AboveZero allowed me to be able to say, okay, cool, I have enough capital to actually start this other thing and not necessarily spend as much time there, hire a person, see how that goes, right? Or, try these other things at the expense of the first gig, but then I also have time to do these other things. Whereas I think if I had a job, I just wouldn't have enough time to do, to pursue these other things that I'm trying to explore.
Do you mind telling us about the other 2? Or
Yeah, so I own a company called Rockstar Africa. For anybody who follows me on Instagram, I bought a company in Tanzania that manages artists. So we have people like Aslay, Omi Dimples. So I manage their careers and their well-being. But it's purely a long play, right? So I really want to get in. I want to shape the music industry in East Africa in a big way. And we're trying to build things there that will likely change publishing, likely change the rules of engagement for any East African artist. And also, I think East African music is going to be big in the next few years, right? Niger has it now. I think East Africa got next if we played well. But there's a lot of money to be made in music, right? So I decided to get in. I've invested shitloads of money that I don't think will come back. If anybody's thinking about getting into music, don't do it. And then I also own a content marketing company, which is synonymous with my business, AboveZero today. So content marketing is just the next iteration of of paid marketing. But essentially, we do a lot of videos for TikTok, for Instagram. They're ads that don't look like ads. So we work with influencers, with creators, creating content for brands on their behalf. And we also license music on behalf of brands on TikTok. So that's sort of another company. It's called Unbolt. But those are 3 things that I manage on a day-to-day basis, yes.
Okay. Leo Fire. I'm going to open it up for questions because I know people likely have questions either about your business, about the transition, about the pivot. So if you're okay with going over time, Kidogo, and folks in the meeting are okay with it, let's open it up. Please go off mute, ask a question, or if you're shy, you can put it in the chat and I'll ask whenever you go.
Hey, Chi. Hey, Leo.
So
I'm going to go first before the flow goes wild. First, Leo, is it you who manages getmziki.com?
Yeah, of the many different things, but that's a thing I delegate as well, right? But yes.
Right. It was just a by question because I do recognize your name from the forum when I used to dabble more with the music industry. So you're familiar. So I'm actually surprised that you do all those other things. And the only one thing I know about you didn't even mention it. So hongera to you. So my question to you, right? And this is more from a perspective of advantages of being tied by the umbilical cord to a corporate structure, to a enterprise that pays you every week. One of the biggest things that I appreciate about formal employment through a corporation or any other entity is the knowledge growth, right?
Yeah.
So in any industry, your knowledge gets obsolete with time. So the skill set I had 10 years ago, I'm in technology, is completely relevant today in 2024. So one of the benefits I do enjoy is that I get to develop my skill set and my experience on somebody else's time. So, or rather somebody else's dime and time. Now, for you as an entrepreneur, do you have any tools or any time you set aside to figure out how do I develop my skills as an individual so that my skill set does not become obsolete and put me out of business with time?
Yeah, I have a rule, right? So I have a rule. I spend 20 or 30% of my time a week playing with things. Like I mentioned, I'm building stuff with AI. I have no business playing with AI, but I think it's important for me to understand how AI works and how AI is going to impact my business, right? So it's a rule. 20% to 30% of my time a week is spent doing and playing with things that I have no business touching. Trust me, right? I've taught myself Python. I've taught myself SQL. I've taught myself PHP. I've taught myself, right now I'm playing with Power BI. But again, I'm not going to become an expert. I just want to know enough so that when I hire somebody, I'll give you a good example. I hired a guy, he's a data scientist, and he was telling me this task is going to take him 8 hours. And I was like, okay, cool. But after I learned Python, I realized this dude was taking me for a ride. You know what I'm saying? And it was something, again, I was just like, dude, why was this taking X, Y, and Z? And I'll give that as free knowledge for anybody, especially for guys who work with gigsters, right? Guys who are on Fiverr. You best to know how long, whatever it is you're asking this person to do, just have a little bit of a background around what it is you're asking for, right? So my rule is 20 to 30%. I know it sounds crazy, but it literally is like 2 hours a day or 3 hours a day, right? I also have, we will laugh, but I try not to use IG until Fridays, right? So I'm being very anal. Right now, I'm teaching myself Spanish, right? I work in LATAM, and I feel horrible that I haven't learned Spanish till today, right? So I'm on Duolingo. So anytime I created a rule on my phone. I don't know if anybody has an iPhone, but you can actually create rules on iPhone so that when I go launch Instagram, it actually it launches Duolingo. So it reminds me, okay, dude, idiot, get off Instagram, go learn some Spanish. And just things like that can allow you to build some level of, again, discipline, right? Where you take things seriously to learn the things you can. I also think we live in an age where there are enough tools in front of us to learn without the peers. So I do miss my peers in the corporate world, but man, like ChatGPT is good or bad, has been such an amazing companion for me in terms of allowing me to learn things that I've always felt like I have to call a guy for, right? So there's things out there that we can use, but it's the discipline that you need to kind of employ yourself to.
So intentionality, focus, discipline, and Ovek, Kevo was with me in high school where buddies from a long time ago. Thanks for asking, because you take it for granted. In fact, with Wawa and the designs, you keep saying, oh, all these people are stuck in old school, but people are asking for new things. And we have to learn new things, otherwise we'll be competitive. So that was a great question. I'd seen, Shiro, your hand was up by seeing Marky Mark. What's up, Mashiro?
Oh, no, I'm good. Sorry.
Okay.
Hey guys, how y'all doing?
Good, bro.
Yo, Leo, a quick question. Ichi, thanks for doing this. But how did you find your niche in this part of the tech space? I mean, you're an entrepreneur who's been doing a lot of different things, but how did you figure out that this was your niche?
That's a good question. I don't know if for anybody who knows me and knows my story, I used to compete with David Kobia, if he's somewhere on this call, right? So there's a guy called Kobia. He lives here. I used to hate the shit out of him. Now he's one of my good friends. Because Kobia had a thing called Mashada. And every time I do something, me and Louis would build something, Kobia would go and do something. It would piss me off, right? So by happenstance, this guy that I didn't know actually allowed me to grow. Because I always tried to figure out how can I be better than him. Now, Kobia went to Stare or whatever he went to. He's like a chop, so I couldn't figure him. But whatever. But to be honest, Kobia kind of made me, unbeknownst to him, gave me a little bit of an oomph, right? Because the edge I got was trying to always be better than what Mashada was doing, right? And maybe I did the same for him, who knows, right? But he would always build stuff and release it, and then we would kind of figure out what has he done, and then I go back and release it. I say all that to say is that I've always found inspiration from people around me, right? And things around me, right? Even Akina Oscar, right? When Akina Oscar was doing Kenya Nietu, I was so fascinated at this chat room. And I was like, what the shit? This thing just talks every day. Like, why can't I be the guy who owns this thing? It was less about monetization. It was more like this thing that people were building that was sort of buzzing. And I just took that to the next level when I started working in San Francisco, right? So I used to work for a company called AKQA, and AKQA was, and still is, one of the biggest digital agencies in the US. So you work in an environment where every day, for those who guys don't know, AKQA built the initial Xbox user interface, right? And for guys who don't know, a lot of agencies build things that you guys think that companies actually own, but they don't, right? AKQA built and maintains the Delta app infrastructure, right? Like it's built by an agency. So a lot of brands brag about their products, but really agencies build those things. So I used to work in an environment where I see these things being developed, and that's motivation, right? Like I'm like, why can't I do those things? Now, again, like I told you, I wasn't a good programmer, but I always saw how ideas are born, how ideas are maintained, and that sort of gave me the motivation to always want to be better at the things that I was doing at the time, right? So I just figured that I have to be better, one or another, right? And for anyone who wants to, if you're curious, I spend a lot of time on Khan Academy, Code Academy. So I've always used tools that are available for free, right? I'm self-taught. I've only taken one bootcamp class in my life, but I'm cheap. So I'll go online, I'll find a free course, I'll take it, I'll learn it, and then I'll come and I'll fake it to the big boss man until I can do it.
So something interesting about what you said is, I believe iron sharpens iron, right? And that's one of the main motivations of Wezesha, right? When we bring people together, there's something that's going to happen that someone out here may be our next person who does like really great things. And so you have people, unbeknownst to them, who you were sharpening your iron for you. But even through that, you had to find something that, I don't know if it's something that spoke to you or something experientially that said, okay, now this is where I'm going. Because we've talked about this, those of you who know, obviously Senga, Monga, Mark. This guy started Levy, and I was telling you, your timing was wrong, your maturity was wrong. It was just the wrong time. But then you always come back and say something different about it. Wasn't the timing that was wrong. What was
it? I just to me, I blame my peers, right? I blame you. I've always blamed you, right? I always say, hey, Ichi, you went to school, you have this knowledge, but you're not able to help me, right? Yeah. Throughout my career, there's only one person who took his time to bring me to his office to talk to me. And I hold him dear to this day, and he passed away. Bonage, a guy called Andrew Mwangala, is the only person who took his time to bring me to his office to talk to me about this crazy idea that I had. And he did that often, right? And he's the first guy who taught me what a projection is, right? And then there's other people, right? Like I think, in fact, it's funny because I see her in the call here. There's Kim Givere, right? Like she's somewhere. Kim, say what's up. But Kim's such a somebody who's so vital to Kim was my boss at AKQA, right? But that was a network. I was hired at AKQA. I didn't know Kim, but Kim was married to a Kenyan, right? But she was my boss and she mentored me and she taught me about pivot tables and Excel and all these things that you wouldn't imagine, but there's a way that people can open up your world to possibilities that you wouldn't know, right? In your path and in your journey. But somebody has to dedicate their time to show you that it's there. Whereas I feel like we just don't have, as Kenyans, man, a guy can know how to do pivot tables and just look at you like, man, you're gonna be wasting my time, man. Like, why should I teach you how to do this Excel thing?
So Nancy has a question, but I have to say this. I think, and hopefully this is where Wezesha helps, right? Because it's been my experience, again, 30 plus years, in telco tech, and I can speak recently with, at Google, is we have a ton of Africans, like a lot of Africans.
Yeah.
I would say majority are Nigerians, right? Then South Africans, etc. And this may be biased on my end, but the level at which Nigerians, let's not talk even about Indians, like let's just remove that group of people who really enable one another, right? Nigerians sitting down, like almost every Nigerian who comes gets introduced as a mentor, starts putting their career path together. The mentees I have who are Nigerians, they open a spreadsheet. They say 3 years from now, 3 years, I ask them, how did you know this stuff? Because so-and-so told me this is how it's done. For us, for whatever reason, again, there's this thing where we don't dedicate time to actually say, you know what, Leo, you have something there. Let's talk about it. Let me hear you out. Yeah. Just to give some historical context, I was working at a startup, IXL, this was circa like 99, 2000. and you told me the levy thing, and I said, okay, I don't know what to do with it, right? And you sent me like a paper. I took the paper, I took it to the CFO. He looked at it. He turned around. He's like, what the F is this, right? And Kenyan embarrassment, yeah, like, hey, man. So this guy gave me something that wasn't good, not my reputation. We start creating all these stories about our reputation, right? We think our reputation hinges on the success or failures of others, which is completely wrong. So, I think that's where we come in. Hopefully with this 5 series session and wherever we'll go, we'll have that place where someone can say, look, I don't know what this means. I feel this way. I have this idea. Is there anyone who can help me sharpen it? And then we become intentional and focused and, give ourselves that opportunity to feel empowered to grow our businesses. So just thought I'd say that. Nancy, thank you for your patience. What's your question?
Sure. I have 2 questions and completely unrelated. First one is, Leo, what are your thoughts about acquisition versus bootstrapping? And the second question is, in a world where we show success and not the work that is needed to get there, and oftentimes you find people jumping into things that are not their calling, they are not prepared for, they don't have knowledge of what it takes to get them through. What is your thought about someone who's gone through the journey that you have, and what is their sense of responsibility in being completely authentic and completely honest about what the journey is like for them, so that people stop jumping into things that they're completely, and not that you can help it, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Leo, before you answer that question, Nancy, excellent question. And I'll say this. When I put this together, I had a little question mark on the 5th person who's going to come. I'm still finalizing that with him, but this person will specifically answer those questions for you, given the type of role they do. I just want to plug that in, make sure that if you're not able to attend, I send the recording to you, because those are really good. He's a broker, talks about the difference between bootstrap acquisition, talks about the different processes, and most importantly, we had a session with him, Wawa and I did, and that question came up all the time. You're showing us the successes, but not telling us about the trials, so that when we get there, it's like we're reinventing the wheel. So I just wanted to commend you on a really good question. Part of it will be answered session 5. But Leo, why do you show us all these pictures of Colombia and US, but then not the ones of you when your hair has overgrown, your beard is not shaven, your kids are puking, what is it?
No, but let's
ask you to attack the man.
No, right? So let's start with the second question first, right? Because that's a critic. I often talk about it to my friends, particularly. First and foremost, I never share my personal pics, right? So very few people know what car I drive, right? Obviously, Ichi, very few people know what money has done for me, right? And I've made it intentional, because I don't necessarily feel like showing you how I live is going to make you want, I just don't believe in that. That's just me, right? My philosophy is not in showing you how I floss or how I can is going to make you want to do what I do. I don't think that's the right philosophy. I want to be able to empower you in a different way, right? I don't know what it is, but social media is just not the way for me to empower people. And I've always said that. So please, I urge anyone who looks at people and how they live, and they're traveling every 15 days, they have a moti, that's not real life, right? Real life is different. And I think, if you hang around with a few billionaires, I have a few billionaire friends, not millionaires, billionaire friends. Most of these dudes wear flip-flops, don't care about motis, and probably don't have a picture on Instagram. And I've learned from them, right? And hopefully somehow that inspires me to become a billionaire one day, right? So to me, I'd say this. I've always seen, especially with Kenyans, Tanzanians not so much, Ugandans maybe, we have what I call River Road mentality, right? River Road mentality is that if I see a guy selling cell phones over here, that guy is probably making money. So me, I'll buy cell phones and I also start selling cell phones. So what happens is you see all these stores of people doing the same thing. And this happens to us. When I was growing up with Akina Ichi will tell you, Ichi started doing what? A+, remember? What are you doing? Networking, right? And then what happened? Let's just call a spade a spade. All your friends started doing what? Networking, right? So we just have a tendency to follow each other, and I don't understand why. And we do the things we think other people are doing. And this, gotta follow your passion. Now it's hard because most people say, I don't know what my passion is. And it's okay if you don't know what your passion is. I always say, I don't think everybody's supposed to be an entrepreneur, right? I don't think everybody's supposed to be a businessman. I think Ichi is supposed to be who he is right now, right? Like he's playing his role and it's amazing. But it's fulfilling what he's doing for his family, and that's all that matters. But we put so much pressure on each other to become things and versions of things that maybe were not meant for us. So I'm not a firm believer of doing something, like I'm not gonna buy quail eggs because that's the in thing, right? Like that's just not me. And I don't believe people should do that stuff. So first things first, forget Instagram, forget that social life. A lot of those guys, even artists who floss about what motifs they have, they don't own them, right? Like that's just rule number one. So keep that in mind. But acquisition versus bootstrapping is interesting. I almost sold my company 3 years ago, right? Ichi knows this. We talked about it. I went to him. We had a long conversation around it. But the offer didn't make sense. My offer was 100% equity. So I didn't sell my company. I decided to keep it. I'm a firm believer of bootstrapping because you learn so many things that you don't know. However, if you're an investor and if you're into tunes, for instance, I bought Rockstar, right? I went and bought this company that already existed, that had things and already had some, had a P&L, had, what I mean? Didn't hurt me, right? But I'm now learning to change things, and it's been difficult because it's not a native business for me. So I'm learning so many things. I'm making so many mistakes because, again, music in Africa, I live in the US, things are just different. It's a tough lesson to learn, right? And I think it's an expensive lesson to learn. So I'm a big proponent of building things ground up and learning as you go and changing and fixing and doing all those things. So yeah, I'll probably say bootstrapping makes more sense for small business. But if you play at a different level, I think acquisition is probably the way to go. It saves you time and effort, and the playbook already exists, right? But you're always likely to miss things because that wasn't like the thing you built. So you might not necessarily know where they get water from, but you just know water comes from the taps, right? Every Friday, and it's cold and it's warm when I do this, when I do that. But what's the process of getting that water to those taps? That's a quick, short answer for that first one. But yeah, finance is again. I'm doing accounting 101. I was like, I should have paid attention in school, man. I was busy. I didn't pay attention in school, but I'm kind of learning what it means to actually understand the value of your company, understand the value of your time, understand the value of your employees from a numbers perspective, not necessarily from a time perspective, but in terms of, because I sell hours. In my business, I sell time, right? I sell bandwidth, right? Time. So you work, you pay me for the hours that somebody has done something for you. And there's a very interesting metric around what that means to a client, to an investor, to a potential partner, to a VC, and so forth.
Yeah, I think, thanks, Leo. I think, Nancy, I have actually a completely different opinion than Leo has on this. So my wife acquired a business 2 years ago, and there were a lot of benefits to the acquisition from being walked through what the company was and a lot of due diligence that needs to be done in order to quantify and qualify that business for acquisition. So to Leo's point, there's a lot of sort of like homework that's being done. But then once you're in, right, then that's where the rubber meets the road. Leo gave us some advice a couple of years back. He said, even though you own the company, your vision will not be shared by everyone around you. And this is true for even corporate and the teams I run. I have this vision, I say it over and over again, and I think everyone understands it. But the reality is people are there to just make a check. Leo, I think that's what you said, right? People are just there to work. So as a business owner, Nancy, if you're hoping that people sort of think through and they spend every sleeping moment thinking about the company. Z, they go, they come the next day, looking for a check, right? And so there's those lessons. And I think we can take some of this to the chat, like once this session is over, but there are so many things. I could speak 10 to 15 things that anyone who wants to acquire a business or own a business needs to learn about that tedious process. How do you hire someone? How do you fire someone? How do you know when someone is stealing? Like, there's so many things. To Leo's point, what's the difference between a bookkeeper and an accountant? What if you don't know your P&L? One of the people who works for Wawa just charges the car. Just charge. Then I was like, why did you buy those cabins? I just bought them. And I was like, do you know how much they cost? You know, they didn't pay. So there's a lot of things that when you delegate to others and you think that they have the same ownership stake in your business as you do, you find that they don't. So I really love that question. I encourage us to maybe also put it in the chat post this session, because I think a lot of people will benefit from it. I saw my partner in crime, Miss Korir, where are you? I think you have raised your hand.
There was an accidental hand raise, but I can ask a question. Thank you so much for hosting this. That was a very informative session. I have a question for Leo. When did you know that you could finally trust somebody else to hand over the reins to do, you know, the next thing, so you can go on to be the ideas and let people do the work for you? When did that jump happen from I'm doing this by myself to I need somebody to do it and I'm letting go for people to do it?
When I realized I don't have time. So like I'm being serious, but I made some mistakes. I've made some. So it's also, I should preface with that my business grew. I'm a victim of what's the word? I'm a victim of happenstance. I made the most money during COVID, right? Because I pivoted on staffing, so I was able to do something. I grew quite a bit, right, during COVID because Americans didn't want to go to work. And the only folks that could work, or rather the only countries that were open for work, were offshore. So a lot of brands sort of came to me to find talent, and I pivoted on that, and that created the chaos that I'm in right now. And the chaos I'm in right now is that I hired people that don't share my culture or my values, right, or my company's values. But I think the first thing was I had to start figuring out how to hire my dream team and how to train my dream team. That's been a journey. So I'm not going to tell you that it's like it happened overnight, but I've let go. You know, Steven knows there's a guy I used to work with called Salo. I had to let Salo go like I had to, right? 3 months ago, right? Because he was a good guy, great dude, but just wasn't driving the results, right? So that's a painful lesson. It's an expensive lesson. But I think for me, I'd say culture is a very big, finding people who share your same culture has been a success for me. So I'll spend more time in the interview process, and it's tedious, and it's probably for some, I've lost people because they're tired of this, you know, like this back and forth in terms of interviewing and rounds of revisions and rounds of interviews. But for the few who have stayed in this process that I've built, have ended up being the right folks, right? And they're still with me till today, right? I have people who've been with me for 7 years, right, till today. So I think it works when you do it well. My senior people have been with me for more than 2 years, which I think is also a testament to that process. So I think spend time finding the right people and take them through the ringer. Everybody has a good resume. I think, you know, most of the people I hire are smarter than me. I don't hire anybody dumber than me, right? Most people have PhDs and all that stuff. Luckily, because, you know, I'm getting talent from offshore. But I also spend more time trying to figure out who they are, right? Which means phone calls, which means really random shit that could never work in the US. In the US, I'd probably get sued for some of these questions. Like, hey, if you go to a store today and you're trying to figure out which iPhone to buy, tell me what's the criteria you're going to use to buy a new iPhone. Sounds like a stupid question, but you start to figure out how people reason out, right? And how they think and how they actually make decisions. Because dudes who are stuck up will give you some very methodical way of how they think. But the dudes who fit my culture tend to give you like, yeah, I'll, probably go online and check forums and go to YouTube. And I'm like, okay, that guy fits my DNA, right? Because he thinks like me, and I feel like we can get along, and it's kind of worked out for me. But yeah, it's a journey. There's no one size fits all, I think.
Thank you. Well, Guru, I see some hand clapping. Should I put you on the spot and ask you to ask a question?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Ichi, for hosting this, and Leo, as always, great nuggets. Since Ichi put me on the spot, I know you said you don't usually have time for extracurricular, but I just wanted, with your busy schedule, your business, you're always thinking about next money. How do you decompress?
That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one. Damn, that's yeah, I take vacation seriously. So number one, right? Like whenever I'm with my kiddos, I zone out. But I've also fallen in love with Blue Ridge. For anybody who knows where that is, Blue Ridge, LEJ. I tend to go just out of Georgia, out of Atlanta, into the woods and hang out for like 3-4 days, right? Without phone, without network. And that seems to give me a good sense of, it's like a reset button for me, right? And again, like I told you, I'm trying this thing now where, I only do Instagram on Fridays, right? Or I only do social media on Fridays, despite the fact that my job involves being on social. But I found that I spend so much time scrolling, right? Swiping up. Like I have TikTok, I have Snap. I've never launched them. I just don't use them as much as I used to anymore. So I've decided I'm going to have social media Fridays, right? But yeah, it's tough, right? And I think I'll say two things. One of the few things I've told myself is that at 50, I'm going to retire. So that's just my thing. I have a goal. One of my goals is to retire at 50 so that I can do the things that I'm, take cruises and all these weird things. So my goal is to say, hey, I'll slave myself till I'm 50 and hopefully I'll have enough, income or money set aside that I just have money working for me, but I'm not doing as much as I'm doing right now at 50. So that's my goal. But the other thing, again, is really like on the weekends, anybody who knows me knows on weekends, I'm not online on the weekends, right? Like I just don't respond to emails Saturday and Sunday. Whereas before, when I was employed, I'd respond to emails on Saturday and Sunday, right? Like you don't do it, but you do it, right? But I think it's just a thing I've had to teach myself and be very, very conscious about it and disciplined that from Friday night, like from right now, if you notice, I've told Ichi, you're not going to interfere with my Friday, right? So I have my small drink. We'll have a conversation, right? I'll go spend time with my wife for a couple minutes. But really, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I just try not to do anything that requires me to think.
Awesome. Well, Guru, thanks for that question. I see you're a good student. So I think I'll close us off unless anyone else who has a burning question. And if you have a question after this meeting, we have the Wezesha, chat. So just post the question over there in the chat and someone will answer. Looking at the chat over here, Leo, Julie was like, when do you sleep? Goodness, right? Sedavali, I don't know who's in Sedavali. Unfortunately, at the level that many of us are at in corporate life now, we're slaves. I actually miss the days of being an hourly employee. And there's something to be said, as you have so many more responsibilities and so much to lose, there's a level of stress that comes in that probably wasn't there when you were, you had less to lose, let's put it that way. Monga, great conversation. Yeah, thank you. So Monga, I'm gonna put you on the spot, because you're friendly. Any thoughts about what Leo has said or any experiences you want to share before we wrap up?
Well, I don't want to take away from our conversation in a couple of weeks, but I'm like Leo, freedom, freedom, freedom. I don't care the cost. I don't care about the cost. If I want to go to Zanzibar tomorrow, then I'm going. I just have to worry about who's picking up my kids. So jobs are safe, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Safe is, some people just have that sense of adventure. They just have that sense where they want to build something. And by the way, you need to have that continuous passion to keep going, because as Leo says, it's not easy. Entrepreneurship is not easy. You almost have to choose which side you want. Do you want the golden cushy handcuffs, or do you want to be able to pick up your kid from school when they're sick without the stress?
Wow. Can't wait. And as a reminder, so Monga is going to join us. You're joining us on the 23rd, right? You have like a Tuesday slot at 9 p.m.
Yes.
Specific. All right, cool. Any final thoughts in the chat or raised hands?
I think, let me just add one last thing here. I'd say if you're thinking about quitting your job, don't plan, right?
Yeah.
I think one of the mistakes I did is I didn't plan well, but I think if you can plan, strategize, plan, put some money aside, and then commit. A lot of us guys don't know what committing means, right? I watched this Will Smith thing. If you guys don't follow Will Smith, go to YouTube, follow him, watch his videos. Despite the slap, Will Smith has a lot of positive shit that he does. On Will Smith's 50th birthday, he bungee jumped off a helicopter. And somebody asked him, like, why, what was this experience like? And he said, one of the few things I learned is that when I was on that helicopter and I was hanging, I had to make a decision. Either I stay, I go back, and I miss out on the opportunity of experiencing this thing, or I just commit. And I think a few of us, me, Monga, Joan, and a few of you folks on this call, we've committed, and we're okay with it, right? Some people are not okay with it, right? Like, you, my wife will never quit her job, right? Like, never. But also she's in a career where it doesn't make sense for her to quit her job. But at the same time, she committed to her job, which is also a thing. Even you've committed to Google. That's cool. And it's okay. Anyone who's thinking about going solo, make a plan and then commit, period. A lot of us guys play the fisi, right? There's a famous story in Swahili where you put 1 foot here, 1 foot there, right? You have 1 foot in your corporate job, 1 foot in your whatever. It'll never work out. I'm sorry. I don't believe in double dipping anymore, right? I feel like you just have to commit, give it your all, even if it's a year, commit to a year. If it doesn't work out, go back, get a job, right? Like, and do your thing. But you gotta commit. Like, if this thing doesn't work out, if you treat it like a side chile, it'll be a side chile, period, right? Like, for as long as you want it to be a side gig, right? And the guys who say, yeah, side gigs work out, cool, they might. But if you want to scale your side gig, you gotta commit, right? And this thing was a side gig for me. I had 5 employees. When I committed, I have 60 employees. That's the difference.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'll wrap us up by reiterating that fact. We had TK, your buddy TK of the Gathering Spot,
Yep.
and we asked him, he came to Google and we asked him, when should a side gig become like a real, self-employed job? And he said, a lot of you are so comfortable that you're straddling both sides. So that, if you start feeling the heat over here, you come back to the cushiness of your job.
Yeah.
And what that does, it doesn't allow you to feel the desperation of the work that needs to be done in self-employment. And you can't actually get the full potential of being self-employed because you have this cushy gig here. So I like what you said, and I'll end us with that advice. Make a plan and then commit. It doesn't have to be tomorrow. So none of you, unless you're already doing this, I don't want you guys saying, hey, after the first series, I'm ready for self-employment. Make a plan and then commit. Cool?
Hold on. Let me do a shameless plug, just because guys don't know, right? So that's the company right there.
Oh, AboveZero.com. Yeah.
You guys don't know it exists. You know what I mean? We're talking hypotheticals, but that's the company.
No,
I appreciate you guys. Thanks, Ichi, for putting this together.
Yeah.
And I'm always open for conversation.
For real. I mean, like I said, even though AboveZero is business to business, I know you've helped a lot of people here, even me. So really appreciative of that. Nice plug from Mwai. Okay, Mwai, you should put Bahati over there as well.
Yeah. Bahati, Cynthia, throw it all in.
Yeah, Ogura, I don't know why I didn't see Cynthia. In fact, why don't we do this? Any of you who have businesses or are starting a business, please put it in the chat. Just, whether it's a handle, a social handle, a website, or the name, please put it in. And then I see, who's this? Carrie, Carrie has a hand raised. Carrie, what got it? She's hiding behind Carrie M. D, is that you?
Sorry, that was an error, but thank you. It is me, D.
People have like these are the names you can't even know who's talking. Did you know that was D?
Carrie, this one, Gary, Carrie.
Yeah.
But thank you so much.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so we have Bahati coffee. Oh yeah, I use that coffee all the time over here in Hawaii. I know that. R&D consultants, Lady Korean, I'm waiting for you. I'm waiting for you. I see the Stock Sisterhood manga in a couple of weeks. Cynthia, I don't know if you guys here, but Ogura, thank you for plugging that. GNG Realty, that's Joyce Green and Mark Green, really good friends. Agi just moved from Florida and is a realtor, so she has Agi come on tour on IG. We have our coach Joanne Wangi. So for those of you who are interested in coaching, Joanne's there. Stock Sisterhood, Nancy, ToriLook.com. Got it. Okay, I'll take that. Our very own Julie has an Airbnb. I just applied for an LLC for Harry Pride. Fantastic. Woo! This is awesome. So, I mean, there's a lot of people here who, who are making this transition.
And
so
just,
you can
sorry,
see
there's a question from Valentine, Steve. You want to answer that?
from Valentine. Let's see what I see.
From Valet.
I don't see it. Yeah. Where is it? Where did she put it?
She says, what are your thoughts on encouraging our kids to pursue their passions even though they don't match yours?
Sorry, I was driving, so I couldn't. My connection was not good. What's up, Leo? What's up, Ichi?
Are you?
Ebu, ask that question again.
No, I mean, what are your thoughts?
question-
You want to ask, Valet?
Sorry. Yeah. So the question I'm asking is, Leo, we all know when you're doing a business, you know what you want individually, right? And as the folks with kids, we know these kids of this new generation, they are a whole different breed, right? They're not like the way we were brought up, where you were kind of almost led on the direction where your career will go. These kids have a whole different mindset. So when you build an empire like you have, Leo, you've worked so hard, you've sacrificed so much or whatever. How, and then you look at your toy and your toy is looking at you like, okay, I'm sorry, I don't care about what you do. And you want, of course, you'll respect that because you don't want to leave it for someone who doesn't have the same passion as you. So how do you maneuver that? Like, do you kill it does it end with you, or do you find a succession or a successor after you who's not really your family member? Like, how do you handle that? And also encourage them to be whatever it is that they want to be that you don't maybe particularly like.
Yeah, I mean, these are conversations we have, right? I mean, Mike is here. So Mike and I mean, plus you, right? But I talk to Mike a little bit more. We have daughters who are at the same age. My daughter's turning 21 tomorrow, but she has zero interest in what I do, zero, right? I've learned not to worry about her being a successor to my business. And it's a bittersweet lesson. What I've learned is I need to be supportive of what she does and what she wants to do, right? And that requires me knowing more about her than she knows about me. And it's a weird thing, right? Because the reality is that, like I always tell people that I'm raising sons. I have two boys, 7 and 11. I'm raising them to make decisions with their index finger, right? By the time my kiddos go to work, they'll not use this device the way us guys are using it, right? They'll be, and especially with the way things are going now, really your kid's going to graduate and they're just going to be using their index finger to make decisions, right? Somewhere. So I can't then tell them, you know what, I built this thing is for you guys, And I remember this is a funny story, and I'll give you this correlation with my dad. My dad owns land in a place called Ifakara in Tanzania. Ifakara is my shags. Ifakara is somewhere in Morogoro. It's so remote. The last time I was there was 1991, right? Once my grandmother died, there was no reason for me to go there. And I haven't been. But my dad, that's his home. Me, my home is Dar or Nairobi, right? So every time this guy tells me, yo, ndakuachia kiwanja huku, blah, 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 I'm like, my guy, for who? There's something called a depreciation. There's something called a liability or depreciating asset. All these things I'm trying to tell my dad that those things have zero value to me because it's just not my thing, right? And it's the same mentality we are having now. Like, again, like I said, you, Vale, Ichi, you're older people. You have a lot of older mentality, and you're hanging on to this thing that we were given by our Zaks and our parents. And we're thinking that that's the thing that's going to make us more relevant with our kiddos. No, our kiddos are going to buy stocks, right? If anything, we need, sorry, Monga, let me steal your shine. But I've been saying this, and I told Sola the same thing. I think your audience is the wrong people. Your audience is my daughter, right? You need to teach my daughter how to buy and trade stocks today. These old geezers, they're old. They have money, but they're old, right? They'd rather keep the money.
Oh, you
their
calling
pension.
an old geezer? Kwenda huko. I mean, don't say that.
Yeah, you guys are old. You're done.
No, but not necessarily. I
No,
actually
for
think
sure.
it that way. I think that I want to give my kid. I don't want to force feed them like I was force fed.
Agreed.
Right.
Agreed.
So for me, I've learned from that. It's like I want them to. I always say, if you want to be a janitor, be the best janitor that there is, but but don't be a doctor because tuliambiwa we always have to be a doctor or a lawyer.
Agreed. But you see, me and you, Vale, me, I'm like you. We know that we only know what we know, right? Because, I was looking at, I was reading about this chick called Bad Bobby. Some chick, she's a YouTuber, I guess. She's a millionaire, right?
Yeah.
I was reading this article about, my kids watch a kid called Mr. Beast. He's a millionaire, a YouTuber.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Did he go to school? I
Yes.
don't know. He's a millionaire, right? So if my daughter tells me she wants to build a YouTube channel, who am I to start fighting with her, right? Because the template she's looking at is different from my template. You get what I'm saying? So to me, I think the mentality I've been sort of, again, I'm not saying I figured it out. I'm trying to learn to support her. Shani is really big on TikTok, right? She's really big on it. She has a gazillion followers, and she's usually trying to do stuff there. In the past, I'd discourage that. In the past, I'd fight it. In the past, I'd be like, yo, what are you doing? You're wasting your time. Go to school. Whereas today, I'll find ways to tell her, maybe you should do it this way, right? Or call your Uncle Mike. He has ideas on how to do stuff differently, right? I don't want to be on it, but I don't discourage it. You get what I'm saying? So to some degree, I'm also saying something really important, is saying that there are other people doing things that are relevant. Me, Monga, people who are doing things that I think can prepare these kiddos for the future, but we're not packaging it in a way that those kids care.
That's exactly what I want you to tell the people, because I think it's important for us to put it out there that it's okay if these kids don't want to follow the path that we think that they're supposed to follow. I think that's important for you to put it out there to say, you know what, let's look at these kids as their own people, as a whole different generation, and let's see how we can help them go
100%.
the best way with their generation. That's what actually I wanted to get out of you, is to say that you want to encourage the kids. Fine, I don't get it, but I'm going to try and understand what it is that you're doing.
100%. In fact, if you must know, Ichi will tell you. Ichi just like the first thing I told Ichi is you need to meet a mentor. I've always told Ichi you need to build a mentorship program for, right? Like, not for us. Ichi's really good with this, this youth, right? Like, and he can take them to Google and inspire them and all these things. But I'm like, yo, maybe my kids need to get into STEM, but they need to hang out with somebody who can speak their language, who looks like them, and can connect with them. So maybe more interaction with Ichi, more interaction with the mic can inspire them. But that's about it, right? At the end of the day, if they want to get into YouTubing, great. If they want to get into, I honestly don't fight those things anymore.
So Vale, thanks for asking that question. I think Joanne and I have a lot of conversations about how we project ourselves and our parents to our kids, right? So that's a whole different discussion about that projection. But I think something that you said that was pretty interesting is very relevant to this conversation. And we don't have to answer it now, but I attended this business seminar where you had all these people vying for funding for businesses. And what was interesting to me was probably 80% of those people were in it to get a business to make money,
Mhm.
not to get a business because it was their passion. So there was this guy who was buying a home health business. Is this guy, you know, those guys on your freeways who put those orange cones? You know, there's a guy who owns a business to do that. Like, that's not his passion, to put cones, you know, in the freeway because there's construction happening. But that's where he saw the potential of money being made, right? Like a guy who owns a mortar, you know, things like that. Those businesses which are money making but are not necessarily things that people would think as someone is passionate about them. So why do I say this, Malik? So if growing up, we used to see Indians, we see Chinese. You know, when you go buy Chinese food, you see the parent and you have the kid. I have this Chinese place we go to. This kid, I've seen him from elementary. Now he's on his way to college and he's there every day because that's where his mother works. I guess the question then becomes is perhaps as you talk to your child, differentiating between this business that I'm doing is to sustain us, just like I would do another job. And I want you to learn about it because, you know, it's a sustaining thing versus this is a job that I have significant passion about and I want you to be the success of this job. You know, like Cassidy, my son Chase, he loves interior design. Chelsea doesn't, right? So maybe I'm tempted to think that he'd be the successor of Wawa. I don't know. So I think, Vale, I mean, it's interesting and thinking about what Johan told me, maybe we're not the ones to have this conversation about it. Because no matter what we say, they'll always think that we're driving them one way.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree. I think that's very important. I mean, I try and reason and think differently with these kids because you want to hear them as much as you want to parent them, but you also want to hear them, and that's the generation that we are in right now. You know, they, you know, and they can bring facts to the table. They'll come and tell you, well, Mark Zuckerberg is a rich guy. He never went to school. So what are you telling me? You know what I mean? So there's fact, and the internet is there. Everything is out there for them. So we want to think, at least try to think differently and try and hear them. That's my passion. That's my goal. And I think that's what I wanted to hear from Leo. So I'm glad to hear that.
All right. This was supposed to be an hour. It's been an hour, 48 minutes, and we've only lost a few people. So thank you all just for your time and for being part of this. This was something, you know, we wanted to start energizing people with the idea of what Wezesha could be. You know, Wezesha, from my perspective, is just this zone where people come in, and when they leave, they feel like they're a little bit more empowered to make a decision. That's it. Whatever that decision is, it's not prescriptive. So the first 5 will be on corporate versus self-employment, then who knows what the next 5 will be, right? It could be something else, but something that's gonna help you come out of this discussion feeling that you're more confident, that you have more information, that you feel more purposeful and can make an impact on the next steps of your life. So thank you all for joining. Joanne, validation, understanding, and unconditional love is all the kids need. Word. Rose, this was awesome. Thank you. Thank you all. Huh? Have a good night.
Yes, thanks. Bye.